Okay, so again, we're talking about VPNs. What are they and do you need one? There's been a lot of people asking about them in the past few months. A VPN is a virtual private network. It's basically a way to securely connect to devices. These could be computers, routers, anything you want to connect up that can handle running the different protocols can be connected through a VPN. And what it does is it takes your network and makes it as though it were private by scrambling all the data. It encrypts all the data. It's also been referred to as tunneling, if you've ever heard that, because basically you're running your network underneath somebody else's network. So it's also called tunneling. What happens is, and it gets a little detailed here, but to try and simplify it, when you have a message going out from one device to the other, there's a header in the front, which is basically the addressing saying, I want to talk to device 12345. You know, it's got the IP address in it. And so there's a header that's got that information, and then you've got your data. Well, the header has to stay unencrypted in order to pass through all the devices. But the data is encrypted. One thing to keep in mind with encrypted data is you're going to be using a lot more bytes when you encrypt. For example, I encrypted hello world with a 38-bit key, which is a pretty small key. Usually use 256-bit keys. So 38-bit key is pretty easily crackable by anybody. And hello world became all that.
And that's with the 38.
Yes, with the 38-bit key. With a larger key, it would be bigger. But I wanted something that would fit on the screen.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, you're encrypting a path to the other device, which then talks to the final destination on your behalf. So it looks like you're coming from that device. So you have your desktop and the encrypted section, and then you talk to whoever VPN firewall you're connected to. And from that point on, it's unencrypted, unless you happen to be using SSL or TLS, you know, you have an encrypted connection to the web server, then that would be encrypted. But if you're just going to a normal HTTP address, this section is still unencrypted. Okay, only the portion between your device and the service where your VPN you paid for is encrypted. A little more detailed view, you got your home network that talks to your firewall in your router. You do have firewalls, right? Don't just have open routers with all the ports open so that anybody and his brother can come into your network. So then you talk to your ISP, they have firewalls, and they'll have a whole bunch of routers internally. And eventually they'll get to their firewall that leads to the outside world across the cloud to the VPN vendor. And the VPN vendor that you sign up with, if you choose to get a VPN, will then have their firewall, and they'll have basically the same setup in there, a whole bunch of routers and things inside. And then eventually you talk again out on the cloud, out to a web server or whatever destination you're trying to get to, an FTP server or mail server or whatever you're talking to. Now remember again, if you're using a VPN, everything is encrypted up to this point right here. This is not encrypted unless you're talking with SSL or TLS. This remains unencrypted. And as far as this server is concerned, you are located wherever this is. So if you sign up for a VPN service and their server's in France, this web server thinks you're in France. There's no way of knowing otherwise because it can't trace any further back. This looks like you to that server. The mail server, the web server, whatever it is, this looks like you to them. It can't see anything past this point.
So I got a question. So
Sure.
I have Comcast. Comcast only sees where I'm coming from, say for instance, Lansing. The basic service in Lansing, the VPN in Lansing.
Okay.
Okay, so now when my VPN goes there to Lansing, Comcast only sees that I'm in Lansing right now.
Now the VPN, the traffic from you, here's the VPN vendor, right? Here's Comcast. You're encrypted all the way up through here. Comcast is only seeing the headers. They see the headers that come from you. They know where you are. But when these guys send it out to the server, they're saying, yep, this is me. I'm my IP address. This is where I'm at. I'm here in France or New England or Russia or wherever the heck this service is located. That's all this server sees. But Comcast is connected to you. They see from the header they know where you're at. They don't know the data.
Okay, that's what I was.
And the only destination they know you're going to is here.
Okay.
They know you're going here, but that's all they know. If it's unencrypted, they know that you're going here. That's the difference.
So let me get this right. So let me,
Mm-hmm.
in other words, if I have VPN on my computer, all my data is encrypted up to the VPN server.
Yes.
So therefore, it's scrambled. Nobody knows.
Correct.
After that server, it goes strictly to the server sends it out to the destination.
Right, and it may or may not be encrypted depending on if you're making an encrypted connection.
Now you said something about you can get that in their services that you can get that encrypted that goes from there too.
Well, no, what would happen is, let's say you're going to, say, your bank, and they have an HTTPS address. Well, that's encrypted. You get the little lock in the browser, that's encrypted. So this portion would then be encrypted.
Now, the problem that I have with the VPNs is that when you do go to the bank, for some odd reason, when you go using a VPN, sometimes you can't connect. They won't let you connect to those.
And I will be getting to that. That is one of the downsides. No, that's a very good point, and I'll be getting to that. Here's an example of a traceroute I did, and traceroute is just a command you can use in terminal that says, show me all the places you go from here to the final destination. And I went to Apple, okay? So here's the internal address here. This guy decided he wasn't going to respond with his address, so it knew it hit a node, but we don't know what it is. And then we hit this node, and we hit this node, and this is some internal network from somebody, whoever VHN is. They had some internal network. Pardon me? Could be. And then we hit another one of theirs, and then we hit some other address, and we hit some other network, RR, Roadrunner probably, something like that. And then we hit somebody else, and then we finally hit a commie, and that's who runs Apple's website, is a commie. So the thing is, let's say that this address here, this 24 address, let's pretend that they're my VPN vendor. If that were true, everything from here to here, all this is encrypted, okay? But everything from here down is not. So let's remember that this guy in Roadrunner, who has nothing to do with what I'm doing, sees all my traffic, just as though I were unencrypted, because I am at that point, okay? So there's no encryption going on here once I leave the VPN vendor. There's no encryption going on unless it happens to be something that is encrypted, like an HTTPS connection, you know, something that would be encrypted anyway. So you're going to need some client software. You can't just connect up. You have to run through a piece of client software that understands how to set up these protocols and understands how to log into the VPN vendor. And some of that stuff can get very complex, which is one of the reasons why the vendors will say, use this software, and here's a configuration file, just use this. Because there can be literally hundreds of different configuration options to set to get the security the way they want it for their VPN. And if you don't get every single one of them right, you will not connect. Now, OSX comes with a client. That client will connect up to some VPNs, but not all of them. And usually you're better off if the VPN vendor you decide to go with has a client, use their client. Don't use a built-in one. If they tell you, hey, here's the configuration options to use a built-in client, then go ahead and use the built-in OSX client. But many vendors require use of their client because they take advantage of features that the OSX client can't do. Because the OSX client can do some things, it works with a few VPNs, it doesn't work with every VPN. And like I said, there's hundreds of different options available depending on what protocols they decide to support. So why are we even talking about this now? Why is there so much interest? There hasn't been up until recently. Well, as we probably all remember, Congress overrided an FCC proposed rule where the FCC was proposing that ISPs would not be allowed to gather up the data of where you were going and sell that data. But what everybody forgets in all this is nothing has changed. It was a proposed rule. It had never been put into play. So ISPs have always been able to take this information and sell it. So if they were doing it, they've been doing it for 15 years. If they felt that it was worthwhile to them, they've been doing it for 15 years or longer. However long they've been connecting people, they've been able to do this. So nothing has actually changed. It's a status quo. Would it have been nice if they'd done that? Sure. But remember, the status quo has not changed. It's exactly the same thing that we had before Congress voted to stop this rule. So what is a VPN really good for? It's great for allowing access to a network that's behind a firewall securely. And when you really need one, the chances are most of the people in this room don't need one. It's a waste of money as far as I'm concerned. You do not need one for most cases. Because let's think back on the diagrams, and let's go back, not too far back, to this diagram. And remember, okay, let's say that you're ticked at Comcast, so you buy a VPN, so Comcast no longer knows where you're going. All they know is that you're always going here. But remember, this is the cloud right here. This line represents a cloud. And we saw that we go through a bunch of different providers here out on the cloud. All these guys know where you went. They could take that information and sell it too. There's nothing that stops them from doing it. So sure, if you want to pay $40 a year, or $60 a year, or $80 a year, or even $40 for a lifetime thing, and I'll get to the other portion of that in a minute, all you've done is, yep, you stopped Comcast, but you didn't stop any of the rest of these people. All these other people can see on every single device that it goes through where you're going. So sure, you could put in a VPN and spend the money, but if the reason is because you don't want your ISP knowing where you're going, you're wasting your money, in my opinion. Yeah, you will stop them, but you won't stop everybody else downstream from that vendor. Sure.
Another question, but it is true that if I go to a network in London, I have access to London's network. In other words, I can connect to things that is on that network. They were telling me that the reason why you want a VPN is because you can also connect to networks that, in other words, you would not have access to.
Well, that's a completely different reason. And yes, if it's to connect to a network you don't have otherwise access to, yes, that is a reason for using a VPN.
Because if you got certain shows in Britain, or certain countries, for example, that you want to see, you connect to that network. If your VPN allows that, you then have access to that actual network. It's just like being on that internet.
Possibly.
Yes.
Because many of those vendors are getting smart about that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the use cases you might have also is you require access to your internal network from outside, from a non-Mac device or to a non-Mac device. Let's say this was a Windows machine and I wanted to talk to my network at home. I have the VPN set up at home so that I can VPN from anywhere inside to my network at home. And the reason I have that is because I have non-Mac devices I want to get to on the inside. I have, for example, I have an internet-enabled power plug. You say, well, what the heck good is that? Well, I have one server at home that crashes about every 3 or 4 days. But it doesn't crash hard and reboot. It just kind of goes into limbo and dies, and you can't do anything with it. Well, it's my mail server, my web server. It runs all sorts of things for me at home. If I'm out on vacation for 9 days, and 3 days in, my mail server crashes, and I have to wait till I can get to the keyboard to fix it, that's 6 days without mail. And I can't go through that withdrawal. I don't know about the rest of you, but I can't do that. So what I do is I can get to that internet-enabled power plug that that server's plugged into and say, reset. And it kills the power for a moment to the server, and then it reboots, and then it comes back up, and it's fine for another 4 or 5 days. So that's one of the reasons I have a VPN. Something to keep in mind, if you have a Mac, you have a laptop, and you have a Mac at home, you can use Back to My Mac. That is a VPN. That's a VPN that Apple has made extremely easy to set up and use. It's all automatic. You just have to enroll for it. You tell each Mac, say, yes, it's okay to access me through Back to My Mac in settings, and then you can access that Mac through the Finder. And you can log into it, you can look at its files, you can open a screen to it and look at it, and that's an encrypted connection. That is a VPN. It's just one that gets automatically set up for you. No charge. Apple's already done all the work for you. They've set all the permissions, they've set all the parameters up, and it just works. It's great. So if all you have are Macs on both ends, you don't need a VPN to get to your home. You can use Back to My Mac to get to your house. And in fact, I'll get to you in a second. I don't really need that VPN anymore. I needed it before they had Back to My Mac, and I've just kept it. But I could go to one of the Macs internally and then get to my non-Mac device, now that I'm on my internal network, and reboot my system or whatever. You had a question, sir?
Yeah. This portion right there, that line, is very Back to My Mac. How do you find that on your where is it?
System preference.
If you go into System Preferences, and where is it? Privacy and Security, I think, right?
So.
First, you gotta have it on an icon.
Oh, right. Yeah. First, you got to turn it on in iCloud. See right here, Back to My Mac. Turn that on. I think that's actually all you have to do.
I think that's all you have to do now.
You turn that on, and then you can go to the Finder, and you see these are all devices, these Multivac, Server 2, Server 3, these are on my home network. These are people here locally, but here's the server I was talking about.
I think a keynote here is that if you're going to a remote network, something on the other end has to have your credentials, same as what you just said here in iCloud.
Yeah. So if you have a laptop you're using right now, and you have an iMac at home, and they're both turned on, and it's on the same iCloud account, and you have enabled Back to My Mac on both of them, you should be able to, just like Jack showed you, have access to the data that is on that computer.
And here we are, I'm logged into that computer. And in addition, I don't have to just screen share. Here's the shares on that computer.
Correct.
Well, yes. Yes, it has to be on.
Mike?
Does that include viewing only, or can
You can do anything you have permission to do with that user. You notice I had to log in. So if that user doesn't have permission to delete that file, then he can't. But if he does, yes, you can delete files. I can go into the local manager files, and I can delete anything in there if I want to, because that's the user I'm logged in as.
But would you be able to log into a different user account, say on a computer?
You can,
Okay.
when you're on the shared screen, if I disconnect. Let me just switch back here. See, it says connect as. You can choose who you connect as, so you can log in as anybody.
Okay. So any user that's
Any user that's on that machine, you can connect as.
so you don't have to have it?
Well, you have to have a user that's on that machine. The user I logged in as is a user on that machine. So that you have to know the username and password of a user on that machine in order to do this. You can't just log into some other machine. Yes, sir.
Can you use an iPhone 6 Plus to do?
You cannot. You cannot use iOS devices for Back to My Mac for some strange reason. You can get third-party software to do similar things, but you can't use Back to My Mac. What I would recommend to do that with third-party software is Teamviewer. Teamviewer. It's free for personal use. If you use it for business, you're supposed to pay for it. Teamviewer is a piece of software you would put on your Mac at home and on your iOS device. They have one of each. And then at home, you set it up. You could set it up so that somebody has to actually be there to allow the screen to go, which is kind of not real helpful if there's not going to be somebody there to work with. Or you could set it up so that it will connect automatically as long as you know a username and password. So you would load Teamviewer, download the Mac version onto your Mac at home, set it up, go through the setup and say, yes, I want to allow it to be connected automatically from outside. And then you download the iOS version and put in those credentials, and you will be able to, with your iOS device, get back to something at home. Very easy kind of VPN that way.
Okay. If I need to help her.
Absolutely.
Is it Apple?
Of course, yeah.
If it's not Apple, TeamViewer would still work.
Yeah.
Because TeamViewer is available for Macs, it's available for Windows, available for Linux, it's available for everything. But yeah, if it's a Mac, she could either turn on Back to My Mac and give you credentials. If she wants to see what's going on, then you need to log in as her, so she has to give you her credentials. But then she can be watching the screen and see what you're doing too, and you can talk her through stuff. Otherwise, she can give you other credentials and you can just do stuff, but she won't be able to see because it will be a second user logged in.
There's also, it's a little inconsistent how you get to it, but there also is asking for permission.
Yeah, there's another way to do it, but yes, absolutely, you can do this for remote. Yes,
Right.
absolutely, it's good for that.
Use that program.
Yeah, as long as you have a halfway decent connection, you can do it. Obviously, the connection is very slow. It's not going to work well. There's a question over here.
Can you do this on your own, by yourself? Connect on your iOS device to viewer? It's just you.
Yes.
How do you turn it on at home?
When you first set up TeamViewer at your home, there's an option that says, I want to be able to connect to this remotely with nobody here on this machine. And then you set up a username and password. Okay, and then you have to leave TeamViewer running all the time, of course. But it can be minimized, it doesn't have to be up on the screen, but you need to leave TeamViewer up in the background. And then you download the iOS version and you put in those credentials and say, I'm trying to go to this machine, put in those credentials. You only have to put in the name of the machine and credentials and TeamViewer will find it, because what they do is TeamViewer will register that machine with their server, and so then when the credentials and the name match, it will connect you to that. It knows where that machine is. You don't need to know IP addresses or any of that kind of stuff. Yeah, and for individual use, it's free. If you use it for business use, like you're getting paid to work on people's machines, then you're supposed to pay for it.
Yeah, can you set it up so that your credentials are different than what your actual
Oh, absolutely.
normal computer?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You set up completely different credentials when you use TeamViewer. Yes. Using Back to My Mac, you have to use credentials that are on the machine. Use TeamViewer, you set up completely different credentials.
Yeah, you have.
Yes. Well, I mean, if you wanted to set everything up exactly the same, I suppose you could, but you probably shouldn't.
Just leave that at home. Yeah, it's not sleep.
If it's asleep, what you're going to have to do, you have to at least have the wake on LAN turned on. And that may not be enough to wake it up. It will work for Back to My Mac, will wake it up. If you have that turned on, wake on LAN. I don't know if TeamViewer will be able to wake it up from that. But Back to My Mac will wake it up if you have wake on LAN turned on. So it has to be on at least, but it could be asleep for Back to My Mac.
Yeah, Back to My Mac will
Wake it
pop
up.
the system and you're in.
But I mean, if it's completely powered off, not much you can do about that.
So, and then on the iOS side, see your desktop, when you're connected to your Mac, that can
If you use TeamViewer, yes, you see your desktop, and you can move it around because obviously your desktop's usually a lot bigger than this. You can either shrink it or resize it and move around and do stuff and use your finger as a mouse and type. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, TeamViewer works well. It works very well, and they're constantly updating it. Yes. Yes, they're doing something like this.
Well, and that being said, well, like Jack said, TeamViewer is free for personal use. I will also mention that TeamViewer is being used by people that want to install malware on your computer.
Right. Don't just accept anybody connecting to your machine.
You want to be cautious about it because a number of people they're online surfing the web. Something pops up. You've got a virus. I'm on a Mac. Or like Steve said, this is Microsoft, your system's corrupt. Which we all know is baloney, and not the Oscar Mayer kind. But these people will then say, well, let me help you. Download this TeamViewer program, and I can work with you on your screen. So you see where that leads. So you've now, one, given them permission to put the software on, and once you've given them permission, now they're taking over your system. And more than once, they will do we need to do this while we're doing that. Can you please type in your password? Which they gather. So if you're going to do TeamViewer, please do it on your terms, not on someone else's. So that way you don't end up with that kind of stuff and people taking over your system. Because at work, when we remove malware from people's computers for them, TeamViewer is one of the things that, let's dump that out of you. Because we'll ask them, do you use VPN for work? And they're like, no. Okay, cool. And we can dump it. Because that way we can get rid of all the traces that got installed on there. So a little bit of caution. I'm not trying to be alarmist, but caution.
Right. Now, again, they can't get in unless you let them in, so just be careful about that. They can't just get in just because TeamViewer is on your system. Even if it's running, they need to know those credentials. And you can also set up TeamViewer so that somebody has to physically be there. Again, if you're worried about that, but then somebody has to physically be there to allow you to log in remotely. So if it's just you trying to get back to your home system, obviously that's not going to work for you very well.
So one of the things that happens to me every now and then is emails, Apple Mail set when it's using email to automatically delete it. And occasionally I'll leave the house and leave my mail on, which means that I really can't get to my mail on the phone anymore because every time something comes in, it's deleted, and therefore, from my phone, I can't get it.
Mm-hmm.
So, things that never happen, I'm going to do that.
Yes. Yes.
Because that happens every now and then.
But for that specific thing, I would ask you why you're not just using IMAP and leaving the mail on the server. And then where you can get it to it from all your devices.
Well, because it's
Yeah, but when you're done with it, you can still delete it, and it will delete from all the devices. If you use IMAP Mail, it stays on the server, okay? And your phone, your iPad, all your computers, all are pointing at that. They'll download a local copy, but the master copy is on the server. And then you say, okay, delete that. It should delete it everywhere, because you say, I'm marking this deleted. And it'll delete it on all the devices, and it'll throw it in the trash on all the devices. But this way, one device reading that up doesn't make it so that all the other devices can't see it.
So you basically just turn on.
If you have IMAP Mail, if you have Pop Mail, then what you're doing is what you want to do. You want to download it and delete it. But if you have IMAP Mail, which is what most people have now, most servers can support IMAP. Originally, Pop was the only way to go. So that's something to look into.
Is that a choice?
It depends on who your provider is, who your email provider is, if they provide IMAP. A lot of times you have to change a couple of settings.
Is it a private email address that you have?
It's Gmail.
So in
Gmail.
Gmail, you can go into settings and you can enable IMAP and turn off POP.
That's what you
And then
want to do.
going forward, it'll be an iMac set up, and so you can delete it on your phone, and then it's off of everything without you having to, set up that rule.
Comcast offers iMac. You have to,
Yep. You just have to enable it.
they got-
Yeah, most places will have it. You just have to change your settings slightly.
Initially, when I moved, I wanted to go back to POP and called Mac, and they said, oh, on the iPhone 6 Plus, no, they didn't allow it.
Yeah, because POP, it's not as good a protocol. It doesn't support a lot of things like push and all these other things that they're trying to support. So, yeah, you'd have to use a third-party client if you're still using POP mail on your phone.
Yeah. So if your email was, say, an iCloud account, yeah, you're iMac.
Yeah, they don't support
That's it.
They don't support POP.
Done. That's all. If it was Gmail, you could definitely download the Gmail app, or you have your option on putting it in.
And initially, the reason why I pursued it, because WoW, as opposed to Bright House, WoW didn't do Mac at the time. They do now.
Yes.
Yeah, just about everybody offers iMac now. So some of the arguments for VPNs is, of course, because we talked about, your ISP won't see where you're going on the net, and you get partial protection of otherwise unencrypted packets. If you're just going to the Apple site, which is not encrypted normally until you get to the store portion, everything would be encrypted up to the VPN supplier, whoever that vendor is. But again, from them forward, is unencrypted unless it's a normally encrypted connection. One other thing that's not on here, as the gentleman mentioned before, is you look like you're from somewhere else. So if you're trying to see something in Europe that they only show to Europeans, and you get a VPN in France, then you'll be able to do that. The problem, we'll get to in a moment. First off, is there's cost involved. There are some free ones, and remember, whenever there's something free on the internet, who's the product? You are. You're the product. Somehow they're making their money. There's no way that they're supporting an expensive VPN infrastructure for free for nothing, for no reason. Somehow they're going to get money from you or from someone else to let you on. So really avoid free things like that. Most places I've seen are $40 or more a year. There are some places I've seen now advertising $40 for a lifetime. One thing that my father told me about lifetime is he said, remember, son, it's probably going to be their lifetime, not yours. Their lifetime is probably going to be a lot less than yours. They may be around for a year or two, then you're going to be buying it again. Do you trust the VPN provider? Okay, so now Comcast can't sell everything you want. Remember I told you everything past the VPN provider could sell? Well, these guys know everything you're doing too. How do you know they're not going to sell your stuff? Yeah, there are rating services out there. One of the articles I was reading talked about that. He said, yeah, some of the ones that were rated really highly one year, the next year, they weren't making money, so they started selling stuff. So just because they're rated well when you sign up, you better keep watching their ratings every year, see how they're rated. And the problem is, a lot of these websites will rate these things once a year. Okay, well, you sign up and 6 months in, they start doing shady stuff. And 6 months after that, you finally find out when somebody rates and says, oh, they're doing shady stuff, you probably shouldn't use them. Oh, guess what? You've been on there for 6 months. So, how much trust do you place in these guys? Because basically all you've done is shift the problem away from your ISP to the VPN provider. There's a lot more bytes to download and upload. Remember Hello World. A lot of ISPs have a cap now. Now, some of the caps are pretty high, but you saw how much bigger Hello World got. What if you encrypt every single thing you did? Now, a lot of things you should encrypt. If you're talking to an email provider, you're talking to Gmail, you should be using SSL, TLS. If you're using the web or a client, you should be using encrypted email. You should encrypt that stuff. You're talking to your bank, you want to be talking encrypted. You're talking to a store, you want to be talking encrypted. You're just going to the Apple site to look at iMacs. You don't need to encrypt that. Why do you need to take that message and turn it into this? Because you're going to pay for that. Your ISP has a cap. And after you reach your cap, you're going to start paying more. Comcast has a cap. It's pretty high now. It used to be 100 gig, and then they went to 300 gig, and now I think they're actually up to almost a terabyte or something. It's really high. But if you start encrypting every single thing you do, you might hit it. You know, you start downloading videos encrypted and everything encrypted, you might hit that cap. And as I mentioned, you know safer once you leave the VPN provider's network. It's just like you came out of your vendor, your ISP, because it's not encrypted unless that connection would have been encrypted anyway. Some things like Netflix won't work. Netflix is onto that trick about, oh, maybe you want to see something that Netflix only shows in Europe, so you get a French VPN. If you're going through a VPN, Netflix will not allow you to watch anything. They're onto that trick because their client can tell that they're going through a VPN and says, no. I don't know where you are now. I can't prove where you're at. I'm not going to let you watch anything. Turn off your VPN. They'll tell you, please turn off your VPN so we can verify where you're at. And they're not the only ones. So a lot of these places are getting onto that trick about, oh, you're not supposed to watch this because of where you're at. We're just not going to let you watch it all because we can't verify where you're at. We don't know for sure where you are. All we know is where your VPN is. So you're denied. And that's what you mentioned, that some places won't let you do it. Netflix is one of the big ones that won't let you do it. Other places are catching on to the same thing. So that trick worked, but it won't work everywhere.
Is this what Trump like to set up for the Russians?
I don't think he's that skilled.
I don't have an insight into that. I can't help you with that one. So if you really want to be protected on these things, though, just use TLS SSL. You know, use somebody with a certificate. Make sure the lock is up there. Make sure that when you set up your email and it says, do you want to use the encrypted version? Say yes. Make sure it's encrypted. Encrypt those important connections. You will get the exact same encryption that you would have got through the VPN. Yes, they can tell where you're at. You might need them to tell where you're at if you're on Netflix or something, but you're still encrypted for those important things. Purchases, your bank, email, any of those kinds of things that are important, you want to be encrypted. But encrypted this way. This is free. They paid the money. They bought the certificate. Let them pay for the encryption. Why should you pay for it? I'm cheap. There is a really good article, if you want to catch up on it, on the Wirecutter, and it has links to a lot of other articles. I used this article to get some of my information. Their take is that VPNs are for most people, but my take is not, as you heard, is that they are not for most people, for most cases. But it's still a very good article. It gives you a lot of pros and cons about why you should do it. It gives you links to some of those sites that do the ratings of the VPN providers. It gives you some cost benefits. And it gives you some recommendations if you decide you do want a VPN, who you want to go with. Again, if you're just using it for home stuff, there are plenty of better alternatives like Teamviewer and Back to My Mac that won't cost you a dime. And if you're using it just to tick off Comcast, I would say you're spending money just to spite Comcast. And if that's how you want to spend your money, it's not for me to say no, but I'm not going to spend my money to spite Comcast. Any other questions?
Okay, now what about Starbucks? When you're in Starbucks, VPNs, my understanding, in Starbucks and the VPN, less likely somebody.
Well, again, if you're connecting to your email, you should connect encrypted. So it doesn't matter if you're on a Starbucks open thing because it's encrypted. If you're talking to your bank, you've got an encrypted connection. If you're buying stuff, make sure it's an encrypted connection. As long as the connection's encrypted, it doesn't matter that it's an open network. This is an open network here, too. In fact, at one of the meetings, I showed people why you need to be encrypted. I started running a sniffer during the meeting, and I picked up about 10 people's email usernames and passwords because they weren't running encrypted.
Okay, now I'm a little confused when you say encrypted. I understand the certificate, but if the website that I go to says it's not secure,
Then
for
you...
example, if I'm on Starbucks, it says that this is an unsecured network.
Right, the network is unsecured, but that doesn't mean... Okay, let me show you here my preferences for my mail. server settings. See this right here? Use TLS SSL. That encrypts my entire connection between me and my mail server. This is my mail server at home that I happen to run, but if it was anybody else's mail server, by using this, I'm encrypted. So it doesn't matter if I go to Starbucks and use their open network, if I'm here and using the open network, and you run a sniffer, you'll see the headers, like I mentioned, because those have to be unencrypted to route the message. It's like an envelope. The difference between an envelope and a postcard. A postcard is your unencrypted message. Everybody can read that if they can see the postcard. But with a letter, it's sealed up. All they can read is the outside, which says where it's going. You got to open that up. You got to break the encryption or decrypt it in order to see what's inside. If you're at Starbucks or here or any place else with an open network and you have this encryption turned on, nobody can read your email, what's going back and forth. They can't read that stuff. And the same thing, you go to a website that's encrypted. If you go to a website that's not encrypted and you're going to put in credit card information, I would say never do that. Whether you're home or anywhere, you should not do that. If you don't see that lock symbol, don't do it. Do not put in any kind of information you're worried about into a website that's not encrypted.
Is that site that you were on, or that screen, is that under network or security?
That's under mail, mail preferences, and it's under server settings. So it depends on your mail client. If you're using Outlook, it'll be in a different spot for your server settings. If you're using some other mail client, it'll be in another section. If you're using a web browser, then make sure you're going to an HTTPS version of the mail. You know, if you're using Gmail through a web browser, make sure you go to HTTPS. I think they force it, actually. I think if you try to go to HTTP, they reroute you automatically to the encrypted version. A lot of sites will do that. As long as you're on the encrypted version, it doesn't matter that you're on an open network. That's what makes you safe. That's why I'm saying you don't need to buy a VPN just for that. Now, if you want to make sure nobody sees anything you ever do while you're at one of those places, sure. But as long as you're going to encrypted sites for the important stuff, that's all that really matters. At least to me. You know, I don't care if some guy at the next table can figure out that I'm going and looking at the Apple site. He can see that by looking over my shoulder that I'm at the Apple site. I don't care. Or he sees me at, a comic book site or a movie site or whatever site. I don't really care that other people see that.
But would you be more concerned if you were buying a computer at Starbucks from the Apple site?
Yes, and then I would want to be on an encrypted network, and I probably wouldn't do it there anyway because too many people can be looking over my shoulder.
Exactly.
But if for some reason I had to do it there because the power's out at my house and I absolutely can't get to the store and I gotta buy an iMac right now, then I might do it. Might be other things you have to buy as well while you're at the Starbucks. Yes. Then don't trust it. You shouldn't be going to, if you're going to a site with a bad certificate, don't go there. I don't care that the program's crashing afterwards. It's probably doing you a favor. You shouldn't be going there. There's something shady about that site. Don't go there. Maybe, or maybe the server's been compromised.
Yeah.
If you're getting a bad certificate from the store, it might be the real site, but maybe it got broken into and it's compromised. You see that all the time on the web where sites get compromised and somebody puts some bad stuff on somebody's legitimate site and then you download it because you're going to a real site. If their certificate got compromised, don't go there. I mean, yeah, it's a bad side effect that thing blows up because you say cancel, but it kind of did you a favor. Don't go there. And you had a question. If for some reason their VPN wants you to use their DNS, then you kind of have to use their DNS. That's one of the 10,000 settings I mentioned that, yes, it could be a requirement. Most VPNs don't require that, but it could be a requirement. It could be the way they're handing out IP addresses and the way they're... Well, you're going to have to work with them as to how you need to set up your computer for that. I mean, if the VPN is going to be on all the time, probably not. But again, I'm not familiar with that particular VPN and how they want you to set things up.
And finding that I have to shut it off.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. VPN, again, remember, it's a virtual private network, so you've made that network private between you and the other side. Of course, the Chinese are getting wise to those kinds of things. They're going to start blocking that because most VPNs have to use certain ports. And they can block that stuff if they want to. At the moment, they're not doing it. Well, I've read articles that said they're starting to, and I've read other ones saying that you can still get it to work. So I wouldn't expect it to work for much longer, though, because they're kind of clamped down on things over there. Yeah.
Screen sharing.
Okay, VNC is just a screen sharing protocol. It doesn't have anything to do with a virtual private network. Now, VNC often will allow you to encrypt that connection. They will do their own encryption for just that connection. A lot of times you can turn that on, but it's not a full encrypted connection. It's just going to another machine and sometimes having it. It can be external as well if you can reach that other side, if there's a way to get there. Yes? Well, you have to take that up with them and find out why they're giving you a warning, what they think is wrong. I mean, obviously they're maintaining their own list. What's happening most likely is they're either downloading a list to your machine or that browser is going to their servers every time and then going out to the Apple site. Well, you're routing all your traffic through these guys. How much do you trust them? You're routing everything you do through them, through that browser, if that's how they work. That's why, by the way, Outlook on iOS, that's how it works. Everything goes through Microsoft. Even if you're using Gmail or you have a home server, if you hook up Outlook for iOS to use their filtering feature, it all has to go to their server. So Outlook talks to their server talks to the mail server, so they see all your email. And they have your credentials, because they have to use that to log into your email. So if you're good with Microsoft doing that, otherwise, Outlook's a great program. They won't let us use it at work for some strange reason. Oh, that's right, we're a high security place. They don't like us having all our email passed out to Microsoft.
They don't want that data read?
Oddly enough, no. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, thank you.
Ready for a new device? Pros and cons on choosing your next purchase. Or as my wife says, needs versus wants discussion. So, first up, these are some questions to ask yourself because no one can answer these questions except you. First, are you happy with your current system or device? I think this is probably the most important question you can ask yourself. What is it not doing for you? What is it doing for you? Because there are pros and cons on both sides of that. I normally will ask somebody, well, what could be better about what you're using? And then the big question is what are the shortcomings? The next thing, does it do everything you need? Not want, but need. And this is where the needs versus wants comes into play. We're going to stick to needs for right now, because I think that's the easier way to go. Everybody wants something better. I don't blame anybody for wanting something better. But if their needs are at a certain level, then that's where you're going to go. I normally will ask people, will your device go online? Can you surf the web on it? Can you do emails? Can you do photos? I can't tell you how many times I help somebody that brings in their 10-year-old Mac and they can't get their Yahoo Mail to work because they're still running 10.5. They've never upgraded since they bought the device. I see that with phones, I see that with iPads. Oh, it's going to break something. Okay, that's a whole different topic. But if you can't do basic functions, then it's probably time to move on to a newer device. Are upgrades still an option for this device? Can you upgrade the software to the latest version? No? How far can you go? What about the programs that you're running? Can you still do everything if you're, let's say you're running Microsoft Office and you're running Office 2004. Okay, but people are sending you files that were done in the latest version of Office that you can't open. Now what? And that's your, I would say, more of your basic user dilemmas. For those of us that use more advanced software, are you going to be able to open that Photoshop file from Photoshop 3 in Creative Cloud? Maybe, maybe not. And then my favorite topic, can you upgrade the hardware still? That's always a big question. A lot of people say, oh, I've had this computer forever. I agree with them. Yes, you have had it forever. But when you make them stop and think about how long they've actually owned this computer, a lot of people, I look at them and I go, it's not a car. You shouldn't be expecting to get 10 years out of this. It's a piece of technology. For a lot of people, it turns out it's a hand-me-down. How many people, have, by a show of hands, have passed a computer on that they've had to somebody else? Okay, the people that you pass that computer on to, have they upgraded from that computer you gave them? Should they? Probably. Okay. When I will tell people the day they bought their computer when I'm at work, because I can see the purchase date. And people just like, no, I've only had this for like 2-3 years. No, it's 7 years old. And it's really surprising when you do the math. My recommendation when someone says, how long will this last me? On a computer, I tell people 3 to 5 years on a portable. That's what you should expect. 5 to 7 years on a desktop is a long time for a computer, even for a Mac. Next up, can it still be repaired? How many people here have a computer that is a year old? Okay, yeah. How many people have a computer that's 2 years old? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Older than 10. Okay, so a lot of hands go up and down on all of those things. So think about that. Anyone here that put their hand up for a computer that they're using that is more than 5 years old, and you don't have anything newer than that, you're not doing yourself any favors. It's time for something newer. Will your computer still work for you? Sure. And that's why we're here. Because everybody wants to help everybody else. We want to keep things up and going. But my 9-year-old Mac Pro can run 1011. That's it. Is it a workhorse? It is for me. But you know what? I don't need to be using a Mac Pro to store my music and movies and pictures on. I don't. I could get away with a Mac Mini, which is what I'm about to do, and just move all that data. Yeah, I've got 4 hard drive slots. Yes, I have 2 optical drives in that tower. I maxed it out with RAM. I've maxed out my system. I'm at the end of the line. I'm done with it. I can't go any further with it. And it doesn't make sense for me to buy another great big cheese grater to hook up my drives in. Because I looked at the electrical bill for that thing just being on versus what a Mac Mini would use for power, and it'll do everything I want. The Mac Pro uses 85 watts an hour. The Mac Mini uses 31. Okay, and that's leaving it on all the time, which my Mac Pro is left on all the time. I don't need that. So moving to a Mac Mini is, for me, is a good thing. For you guys, maybe not, but it's an option. The big part of this is, I can't get my computer fixed. And anybody that has a computer that's more than 5 years old, neither can you. At least not through Apple. Because just recently, anybody that has a late 2011 computer joined, Chuck, you joined what Apple calls vintage status. So, vintage means more than 5 years from the last model that was sold. So at that point in time, Apple no longer stocks parts for it. There is one exception, and that is California law requires that they hold parts for 7 years. So if you bought your Mac in California and you currently live in California, you can get it repaired still through Apple. But if you're in any of the other 49 states or anywhere else in the world, nope, you're done. Which brings me to obsolete status. Anybody with a 2009 computer or even a 2010, you have joined the obsolete status. Obsolete status means definitely, even if you're in California, you are not getting it repaired through Apple. It also means that Apple no longer supports software that ran on that computer. And if you have a 2010 machine, say running 10.11, which is very doable, or maybe even Sierra, at that point, if you're having trouble with, well, the software that's on there, Apple doesn't have to support that machine anymore for you. So that's something else to keep in mind, because they're giving you free support, but eventually you have to draw a line.
Dave,
Yes.
one question you didn't mention. I just purchased the new MacBook Pro in the last 6 months.
Yes.
2 Lightning connectors only, right?
Yep.
Are you willing to buy the add-ons to do what you want to do?
That's a little further in this presentation,
Okay.
but thank you for bringing that up quickly.
Clarification, if you have a problem with your computer, you can take it to the Genius Bar and usually get help.
Right?
Can you still do that with a vintage computer? Even though
You can bring it, vintage machines you can bring in for software support.
I mean, will they like look at it and say, okay, you have a hardware
Yes.
problem?
Yep.
But they won't do that they won't have to do that if you've got an obsolete.
If you have an obsolete machine, they are not required to do that, but most Apple stores will still, come on up here, let's take a look and see, let me confirm this with you, and that. So while you will get help, let's say you had a problem running Pages 09. They're gonna say, can't help you. The newer version of Pages, okay,
Well, let's say I have a computer and I turn it on, nothing happens, and I take it to the Apple store.
so
If
that's
it's
a hardware
vintage-
issue.
If it's vintage, are they likely to look at it and say, okay, that's a hardware thing?
Yep.
It's definitely hardware.
They will help you confirm that it won't turn on, yes.
If it's obsolete,
If it's obsolete, you could probably walk in and they'll say, well, let's plug it in and see what happens. I have people all the time bring in PowerBooks. Okay, we stopped making PowerBooks in 2007. Or, I'm sorry, 2006. But we get people all the time. The hardest part, they come in without the adapter. Okay, how are we going to plug it in? Because we don't have that adapter anymore. So it's awkward. Or, hey, my PowerBook works, but I just need to reinstall it. Reinstall the OS. All We don't have that software on our servers. I can't load Tiger on your PowerBook for you. I can't even load Leopard anymore. You know, the oldest I can go would be 10.6, and that's not going to work on a PowerPC machine. So that's where that is. So, how old is too old? Okay. Do we all love this machine? I would say yes.
Classic 2 was my first Mac.
Yeah, well, this is a 128, so it's the first Macintosh. With technology advancing so rapidly, if you make a living with your device, time is money. Do you need a new system every year? Probably not. I mean, I know people that lease cars every 2 years because they want to drive the latest and greatest. Okay, you can lease a new Apple every 2 years too, because Apple does leasing, especially for businesses. And they are all happy to talk to you about your business needs at any Apple store. Look at it this way. Apple Care expires after 3 years. Coincidence? No. I have people yell at me, and yes, yell at me, that it's planned obsolescence. You know, the day we're born, we start to die. That's my wife's favorite line. It's just going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. And the same thing with your devices. But hopefully it's a lot sooner they'll go before we go. So, to a couple of questions. What will still work if you buy a new computer? Printers, scanners, hard drives, optical drives, monitors, Ethernet. Some people like to be hardwired. Got it. So anybody that buys a new computer whenever, they're going to have something that may not work with it when they get the new one. Typically it's a printer. Yes?
Apple, I bought one a couple of years back, 3 years ago now, and it's a big 25-inch. And it didn't have an optical drive.
Nope.
It didn't have any. You have to buy it as an add-on.
Correct.
From that,
Right?
and they have.
Well, not from Apple. You can buy it from anywhere.
Yeah, but I thought.
It's easier to buy it from Apple.
That's what I did.
Sure.
But this is true with the new laptops.
Correct. There is not one Apple device that has an optical drive in it since last September.
And the reason for that is.
Most people do not use the optical drive. You are not most people. Brian had a whole box of empty CD boxes over there for free. Brian now is taking home all those empty CD boxes because when's the last time, honestly, you put a CD in to load a program? When's the last time you put a CD in to burn a disk? Now, sure, but for a lot of people, they look and they're like, it's been years. Because, as Jack said, you want to watch Netflix? Well, why do you need a DVD to carry with you? Log on to Netflix. You want to download the latest software update? The last Mac OS that came on a disk was 10.6. We're on 10.12. Every version has been a download.
Most portable PCs don't have
Right. You buy a Chromebook, you don't have an optical drive. I mean, take your iPad. That was a big complaint. A lot of people, why can't I get a drive for the iPad to watch my DVD? Just download it onto there from your computer. It's easier. It's one less thing to carry around. It's one less thing to be damaged. So, going along from there, like I said, typically it's a printer. Sometimes it's a scanner. Depends on how old it is that you have. How does your hard drive connect? Firewire, Thunderbolt, USB? Okay. Do you really need to burn or access CDs or DVDs? Some people, yes is the answer. For most people, probably not. I have one super drive at home. One. It's a portable one. It is shared between my wife, myself, my son, and my daughter. It's been out of the box once. One time. And that was because my daughter wanted to load an older version of Sims on her laptop. That's the only time it's been used. So it's there, but it's just, everything's a download now. Do you need to connect to monitor your computer? What kind of connection is that? Ethernet. A lot of people would prefer to be on Ethernet because it's faster than Wi-Fi. Okay, I get that. Don't blame you. But if you buy a new Mac, you're going to need an adapter for Ethernet because none of them have an Ethernet port on them. Because, well, I'll take that back. None of the portables have Ethernet ports. Because one, they keep making it thinner. And to make it thinner, you have to remove the fat devices. That's why FireWire went away. That's why Ethernet disappeared. The other thing to concern yourself is, when you get that new computer, what's the hardware that you're running at home, besides your printer? Are you running say a time machine backup through your time capsule? Or do you have an Airport Express? How old is it? Because your new machine is running on a faster protocol than maybe what you have at home. The people that I helped yesterday with the 2007 iMac, they brought in their time capsule. It was the flat sandwich box time capsule. It was the very first one that ever came out. And we explained to them, well, you're buying this new iMac. I see you have iPhones. Do you have iPads? Yeah. Okay. This computer was the weakest link in your network next to that time capsule. This computer slowed down everybody's internet. Now it's going to be better, but to take advantage of it, you need a device that can put out more Wi-Fi power for you. So they did that. You have a RAID set up, even just plugging in a USB drive. Okay, I got a thumb drive, I want to plug it in. Oh, it's USB-A. It's the rectangle shape. It's not the new USB-C, the little oval. So now, the question is, are you ready to invest? Are you going to spend the money for all the different dongles that it's going to cost to use your older devices? Or are you going to spend the money on buying new devices, new hard drives with USB cords or USB-C cords with it? A lot of the manufacturers currently, when you buy a USB or a hard drive at Apple stores, you get a USB-A cord and a USB-C cord in it. LaCie does that, Seagate does that, so that way you can use it on your older computer as well as on your newer computer. So that's something to consider. You want to use Ethernet on a brand new MacBook Pro that has USB-C ports only, you need a USB-C to Ethernet adapter. You want to hook up a display, hook it up to your TV, there's no more HDMI port on that MacBook Pro. You need an adapter or a dongle, depending on how you want to phrase it. USB-C is the future. There's no turning back, that's where it's going. So if you are going to upgrade, you need to keep that in mind. And this is a quote from somebody that we all know, and I'm probably paraphrasing him with this quote. Being on the cutting edge of technology sometimes means you have to bleed a little, and that's Terry White. That was his statement. He's like, if you want to catch the latest and greatest as soon as it comes out, it's going to hurt a little. And it can either hurt in your wallet, or it's going to hurt by productivity being not as fast as you'd prefer. So, that is my very quick presentation today.